A topic that's absolutely exploding right now is airway dentistry and just airway difficulties in general. But the question that's often not being asked is, why is the body restricting its airway? What's going on structurally? And when it comes to our overall health, that question and chronic pain are often not asked in the same sentence. So today I have on Aleena Kanner, and we're going to dive deep into postural restoration, what that looks like for your airway, what that looks like for your vision, and why you may want to reconsider certain sports, certain habits, and how they impact your overall health, even down to the shoes that you wear. I really enjoyed this conversation and can't wait for you to listen. Now, if you're interested in exploring some of Aleena's resources, please head down to the show notes. All of her links are there. She's very active on Instagram as well. And again, she's got a really lovely library of resources and information. I'm definitely going to continue following her and recommending her work and hopefully collaborating with her in the future. So please do enjoy this episode. When it comes to health, I don't think that you should be taking handfuls of supplements a day, but there are a few things that I think can be really helpful, especially in our modern world where we tend to live in a bit of a toxic environment. That's why I'm a huge fan of Black Lotus Shilajit. Now, they're a family owned business that's been in the health and wellness space for 20 years, and their Shilajit is actually way more reasonably priced than what I have seen out there on the market. They have excellent sourcing, and they do third party testing for mold and other harmful heavy metal and contaminants that other products don't necessarily do. So if you're looking for a good Shilajit, if you've heard about some of the amazing benefits of remineralization and helping to gently detox the body from heavy metals, I really highly recommend Black Lotus Shilajit. You can use code Sarah K to save 15% site wide. I'm a huge fan of the tablets, but they also have it in these really nice glass bottles, in capsules, and all other kinds of ways. You can get it as a resin if you prefer it that way. But it's a really great product. I highly recommend it. And again, you can use code Sarah K to save site wide. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am super excited to have today's guest here. We probably could have talked for like another 3 hours and then just not even recorded. So this is going to be a fun conversation. Aleena, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's true, we could have talked for another 3 hours. I'm glad we started recording.
To record at some point, but yeah, I mean, there's so much that you do that definitely overlays with, I feel, quantum biology and supporting the system as a whole rather than, looking at the body as this biochemical model and kind of throwing all these other interventions at it. So let's talk a little bit about what you do, how you see the body. I definitely want to talk about airway because that's a huge topic these days, and how you look at that a bit differently as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting with what's going on with the explosion of talking about light, and I'm starting to get really into it, and I find it fascinating. But what I found fascinating and I still do, is what my specialty is. So I study something called postural restoration, which is essentially looking at the human body in a different lens, which is what we do when it comes to light biology. We're just looking at the human body from a different lens. And with postural restoration, we look very deeply at the asymmetries of the body, the brain, and how the brain understands these asymmetries and how the brain senses our environment, our external environment, and what that does externally on our bodies. And you mentioned airway dentistry. It's definitely something that it's really been on the radar lately for
Mm,
so many people, especially
everyone.
moms with kids,
Yes.
because
Huge.
it's something that you can't ignore in today's society. And
Mm-mm.
I think as we live in this more modern society where we are sitting for hours on end, we are not outside, we're indoors, we're underneath artificial lighting. We're seeing that these asymmetries that people have and always have had, these asymmetries are actually getting a lot worse. And I really believe that it's due to lack of movement, lack of sunshine, and just being inside all day long. And even in the summer, people are sitting inside. And I think that along with our natural human asymmetries, we're all born with some natural asymmetries, but why are we seeing it so much more significant lately in the last like really 10 to 15 years? I feel like it's been a boom of people in chronic pain. And
Yeah.
so what I do is my goal is to help people, to give them a really deep understanding about what's actually going on with them, to give them a holistic view, understanding that there's more to it than just your asymmetries, um, and to really empower people with understanding that they can heal.
Yeah. I love that. And I agree with you 100%. I think that there's, kids have got these phones and iPads constantly in their face. So there's the non native EMF, which is causing a loss of cellular water, dehydration, as well as uncoupling vitamin A from the eye. And then there's the postural side of things that you just can't ignore when you're holding a phone or a tablet, you're hunched over. And when you're outdoors, you're, you know, getting infrared light, you're getting electrons from the earth, you're sensing the earth. There's that proprioceptive piece that I think is missing because we're all walking around on flat floors all the time. We never walk barefoot outside on an uneven environment, which is something I've heard you talk about. That's pretty fascinating. That's made me
Yeah.
think because I'm always barefoot around my house. I don't really wear shoes. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should be wearing shoes because I will walk around in my backyard. I make a point of doing that where there's like terrain, and
Yeah.
I make a point of doing that every single day, but I'm just like most of the time I'm walking around my house barefoot with no shoes on. Um
Yeah,
Maybe
this
we
is
could
an
start
interesting
there.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really interesting thing because I'm all for getting that electrical frequency exchange that you are getting when you're outside barefoot. I live right here by the beach. I am barefoot at the beach all the time, especially in the summer and even going into September and October.
Mm.
But there's a really big difference in being barefoot in your home when you have a flat floor, whether it's concrete or tile or
Right.
wood
Yep.
carpet, you're not getting that frequency exchange. And on top of it, your foot needs to be able to move and mesh and mold with that external environment. And when it is stepping on a flat surface, it physically cannot do that. So there are different movements that occur in the foot, and we really need to be able to access all ranges. And when it's a flat surface, that's not happening. So
Mm.
what are we doing? Our foot's essentially just slapping the ground, and we're not getting that full range, which is going to transfer to stagnation up the pelvis, the rib cage, the cranium, etc. So for some people, it's fine. Like I do walk barefoot in my apartment as well, but that's after years of getting myself into a place where my body can handle it. So I don't tell people that, hey, I'm going to put you in this shoe and you're in jail here forever. But I don't say that to people, but I do recommend that people wear shoes, a very specific type of shoes, even at home, especially at home when they're working and doing nothing, because that sort of we're kind of bringing the ground up to the person's foot. We're not going to get that electrical frequency exchange since we're not having our bare
Founded.
foot touch the ground, but we're going to, from a structural perspective, give the brain a different sense of that ground, of that external influence from the ground instead of having this flat surface. And
Mm.
what's so interesting is like the barefoot community goes wild when I talk about this. And I get the idea behind barefoot shoes. It's all
Sure.
fine. Like I have a pair of barefoot. I wore them, but you can't just jump to being on flat surfaces with barefoot shoes. You're gonna stress.
No.
Talk about sympathetic. That's going to stress your sympathetic system out to an
Mhm.
extreme because we're not meant for that. We're meant for this flow of movement in the foot. And so I really recommend Brooks and Asics, and
Okay.
there's like two Hokas, but they're very specific, the ones that we recommend. And our institute does a really good job of every 6 months putting out a list of the best shoes on the market. So there's different qualifications of a shoe that are going to work well with us as humans. And they're typically running shoes that they look at, but that doesn't mean other shoes are not efficient with it as well. So I'm a big fan of shoes at home. And I
Mhm.
think what I've noticed is people really feel significantly better when we change their footwear.
Interesting. Okay, everyone in my family is getting new shoes.
I'll tell you what to get.
Even the toddler. I mean, he likes to run around with his shoes because I think he likes the noise that they make, but
Yeah, well, like toddlers, this is a question I get all the time too. Like parents are always like, "What do I do for my baby?" Just have them outside barefoot. That's fine.
yeah. At the
That's it.
park, he's always trying to take his shoes off. Like he always wants to take his shoes off when he's outside. And I'm just like, it's fine. We got just
Yeah,
go run in the yard, but
because he knows naturally that he feels good for him.
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't really stress about shoes until a kid is like 7.
Okay.
Then we can put them into like a bed or shoe, or when they can fit into one, because really
Right.
most of the time, Asics does make kids shoes,
Mm,
but I think they're usually around like age 7, 8 that they can fit.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll make sure to have the links down in the show notes if people
Yeah.
are like, where do I go look at these? Because, yeah, I know a lot of people will ask. And it does definitely kind of break that whole everyone should be barefoot, wear the barefoot shoes. And I've always kind of thought, should you be wearing barefoot shoes on a flat concrete surface in the city? Does
Yeah.
it actually make sense? Like intuitively for me, that's just kind of never really felt right. But now hearing you say that it can kind of just mess up the whole system, it makes sense to me. It really does.
Yeah, I mean, we have the way I kind of look at the human body is we have one movement that's all the way on one side of the spectrum, a neutral movement, and then the other movement that's all the way on the opposite side of the spectrum. And we
Mm,
have that occurring every single area of our body, our rib cage, our pelvis, our head. It's kind of like we have the sun and the moon, and then we
mm,
have the middle of the day. And that middle of the day is like that easy point in between both. We have the same with our body. And
mm.
so with when we're walking in on the ground in the sand, we're getting that full range. So we're getting that extreme of what we call supination. We're getting that mid stance or when we're just neutral. And then we get that pronation when the foot flattens into the ground and is able to push off. But when we're just on flat, we're missing really, most people are going to miss that pronation component. They're going to be so stuck over on supination, inability to get to that middle range, and then inability to pronate and push off. So shoes really help with that component.
And as you said, that pushes you more into kind of a sympathetic dominant state with the nervous system as well, correct?
Yeah, so we'll see that most people, a lot of people, including myself too, will naturally want to be on the outside edges of their feet. And if you look at
Mhm.
shoes, the sides will be completely worn, and
Mhm.
that will translate to a pelvis. Actually, I have my pelvis sitting here, so I'll show you. To a pelvis that's actually forward on both sides. When you
Ah,
have this pelvis forward on both sides, the rib cage will most likely come up and forward on both sides, and that's a very, very sympathetic position to be in all day long. That position's fine if you're going to the gym and lifting weights for an hour, but you need to be able to get out of it to get into your normal life and just
yeah.
take a breather. So that's what we'll typically see is that the shoes can actually influence the position of the pelvis and rib cage like that. I see it in the clinic. I have like a bunch of shoes here that I test people in, and they'll come in. I'll change their shoes that they're wearing. I'll make them walk just down the hall and back, and their pelvis will be differently aligned.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Something so small that we just and but the thing is that we're walking all day long. And so we're really, really doing so much to the body just by the way we hold ourselves, the way we stand, the way we're walking. I think it's just unconscious. And so I love this kind of looking at the body through this lens rather than the typical lens of like, biochemistry or surgery. This makes so much more sense because even if you do, and we'll get to the airway in a second, I have one more question. Uh,
Yeah.
if you do a surgery for someone and you don't fix the root cause, then it's just going to come right back. This is the problem.
Yeah.
And that's what,
Like big.
yeah, yeah. I want to ask quickly before we jump into the whole airway conversation
Yeah.
about exercise because there are so many. I was a yoga teacher for 12 years and yeah, it was, and there's so many different types of yoga. Like one, Bikram yoga was,
Yeah.
I locked out my joints. And, then I went through this other yoga training and I was constantly having my teachers like poke on the back of my knees, like stop locking everything. There's so many different types of yoga, but overall, I think some yoga can really, really jack people up, honestly. I'd love
Yeah.
your opinion on that.
So I was a gymnast. So I grew up as a
Mm-hmm.
gymnast. So I feel like I am allowed to talk negatively about gymnastics, about yoga, about anything that teaches extreme flexibility because I did that growing up. So I'm preface that the next things I'm going to say by the fact that I get it. I've been there. I was a gymnast. So yoga can be extremely detrimental, actually. I
I
think that
agree.
not all yoga is created equal. I think that what kind of yoga practices we practiced a millennia ago that like really started us off in yoga is very different than what people are doing today.
Mhm.
Modernized yoga with this extreme static range of motion holds where we're doing 8 million different things in one yoga class. I
Mm,
think it's dangerous actually.
agree.
We, like I was mentioning before about the pelvis position, we see people come in a pattern. And what I typically see with these patterns is that they're stuck in a position that they cannot get out of. So, like I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned before, pelvis could be forward on both sides, and then that person can't get out of it to be able to get their body into a parasympathetic. With
Mm,
yoga, it adds an extra layer on top. So, any hypermobility problems, which we see with people also with EDS, um,
mm-hmm.
contortionists are they
Mm-hmm.
really struggle, gymnasts, ice skaters, dancers. These are the toughest patients because they
Mm,
are so hypermobile they can't sense anything. So, for example, if you look at a diver or a gymnast that can put their nose to their knees and can just literally fold over flat, their brain has not registered those hamstrings as controlling the pelvis. Their brain has dropped off those hamstrings and they just don't work the way they should. When we fold over flat and we go down to touch our toes, we should feel a pull in our hamstring. And
mm-hmm.
if we don't and we're able to just go completely flat, those hamstrings aren't registering to the brain, hey, like don't go so far. You need to, like, that integrity of the pelvis becomes compromised essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what I see in these hypermobile people or athletes. Um, I do work with a good amount of dancers and I've worked with some contortionists, and it is just they are fighting an uphill battle against their sport, or yogis, especially if they're going to continue doing their sport. We can
Mm,
do it and we can get them to a place where they maybe feel slightly better, but it is not easy because of the demands of that flexibility that they need for their sports. So
mm.
it's tough. I mean, usually when a general person comes to me, and they are doing yoga 2 to 3 times a week, I'm like, you gotta tone that down. And I
Yeah.
never say stop your sport because I was an athlete that I was told to stop my sport. And so for me personally, I'll never tell somebody to stop your sport because there are identities around it, and
Sure.
just it was brutal for me, so I would never tell somebody to do that, but I do educate in a way that makes sense, and I give them another option. Hey, why don't you try this other exercise program? Or, I have a friend who has an app, who is her app is brilliant. It's called Loa, and I
Mm,
send people over there, and I'll send you the link to it. She'll love that I
nice.
mention it, but I send a lot of my patients to her app because, as I know, strength training in the same um context that she does, but that's not what I do. I want to do more of the dental, airway, vision, all that stuff. But her app has been wonderful for people, and she was also a yoga teacher, and she
Mm,
understands that mentality, and so she's been able to merge it with proper exercise. I really
nice.
think strength training is key, and not just overly going into hypermobile states where
Oh, yeah.
your brain is essentially losing sense to your body. That's
Well,
not
I had to start strength training about a year into teaching because I was in so much pain all the time.
there
Like
you go.
I was blowing my shoulders out and I'm like, I'm in my early 30s. This makes no sense at all that I'm always
Yeah.
injured like this. And I had to start strength training. And I did taught classes at some athletic clubs and gyms. And so it was like, if I'm going to teach, I'm just going to go train while I'm here. So I had some really excellent trainers over the years that I think saved me from completely messing myself.
Yeah. And
And
that's
my
interesting.
trainers were always like, don't do that. What are you doing? Don't do
It's
that.
the
Stop.
yoga. I have never met somebody who does long-term yoga in the US, like consistent
Mhm.
yoga here, that's not in chronic pain.
Yeah, I was in
That's
all the teachers were always injured. And
always.
on top of that, there was like always like vegan diet, smoothie,
Yeah.
nuts, and seeds, and plant, all the plants and stuff. Like it was, but that's why I quit, eventually why I quit doing Ashtanga yoga. Cause I had gotten through the first series of Ashtanga. I was going every day to the shala and doing the whole thing. And I was about to start the second series. And I just asked someone that was on maybe like third series and was serious. I'm like, when do you stop being sore from this? Because I'm so sore every day. They're like, oh no, it's just part of the practice. It's just part of the yoga is learning how to live with the pain and the soreness. I'm like, cancel. Like,
Yeah, it's
I'm
not worth
done.
it.
Like
Yeah, it's not
I have
worth
enough
it.
things in my life to cause me pain. I don't need my body to be hurting all the time. But it was like all the teachers were always like, oh, my hip went out again and this shoulder's out. I'm injured. And I'm like, something's wrong, y'all. And
Yeah.
by the time I finished teaching, the only classes I ever wanted to teach were restorative because I was sick of people getting injured in my classes. I was like, I'm only teaching restorative. Like my, that's it. I
It
want,
tells you something though when all the yoga teachers are injured and hurting, and that's just one studio. Like this is
right,
across the country. This is a known thing that yogis are
problem.
not. Yeah, and then now there's also the fad of wearing barefoot shoes when you're a yogi. Like so now
Right.
we're literally ripping off layers of sense to our brain, and yeah, I'm not a fan. I don't, it's so funny because I was a gymnast. I could do splits. I could forward fold, and I can't do any of that stuff anymore. And it's like I feel accomplished the fact that I cannot do that.
I love it.
I'm like, I can't do that anymore. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I could still do a flip. So that's all that matters. Because
Wow.
that's
That's
explosive, that's
impressive.
power, not flexibility.
Right. It is. It is strength. Yeah.
Yeah,
I can still handstand. I handstand all
I
the
can do that
time.
too. That's
Yeah.
the best. That's fun.
Handstanding is fun. That's like, it feels good. So I do that all
So
the
good.
time still, even in my mid 40s. But
Yeah.
yeah, I haven't attempted to do any splits or any of the weird crap I used to do. I'm like,
Oh my
why
God.
why do you even need to do that with your body? Like I don't get it, but there yeah, it's a whole world. But anyway,
I love it.
yeah, from that perspective it makes sense. And then also, one other little thing on this before we jump into the whole airway thing is that on top of my nervous, my yoga teacher friends always being injured, being in pain, I feel like the nervous system dysregulation was huge, like
Yeah.
huge, huge, huge. And of course, I wanted to blame it all on like vegan and being plant based and never eating any meat, which definitely played a part. But this whole conversation we're having today opens up a whole new level of the sympathetic overdrive and like stripping away layers of information that the brain actually needs for survival for parasympathetic, and it just like major light bulb.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, the things that we're meant to do as humans are to be outside walking lots of miles, long distances, and to breathe. Like that's
Yes.
what we're meant to do. And when I see patients come in the clinic, I will see nervous system dysregulation in the clinic with just looking at their rib cage or just at
Mhm.
their pelvis or at their cranium. And these yogis, they almost always have it. Like they almost have like multiple layers of compensation, multiple problems going on at once. And the veganism, I agree, is actually extremely detrimental. I think that the dentition of vegans is very, very poor.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, and I think I'm not a fan of all that plant-based food that is chemicals, essentially. It's essentially
Right.
chemically made. You're not getting the nutrients you need from our earth, and
Mm-mm.
that's not going to suffice for a long, long life, um,
Mm-mm.
or a long quality of life, and
Right.
comfortable. And then on top of it, you have that you're doing this sort of movement that's literally stretching out all your ligaments, and those ligaments don't go back.
Mm-mm.
Plus with wearing something like barefoot shoes, and then we have this other component of like, are you outside, are you getting sunlight in your eyes, are you actually getting the different rays of sun, are you watching the sunrise, sunset, are you living that life
Mm-mm.
way that our brain, our body is meant to. But yeah, I see nervous system dysregulation just by looking at the body, just
Mm.
by of putting my hands on that body and seeing what's going on. And I can see when the person has made significant changes, I can see those changes on their system because things like whether it's a rib flare on both sides or just on one side, that will go away. It will decrease. It will change. The pelvis position will change. And I measure pelvis position with testing because
Mm.
just because you're visibly like, I was a gymnast growing up in my developing years. I will always look like I have an
Wow.
anterior pelvic tilt. My pelvis always looks slightly forward, but it's
Mm.
not. And I know because I tested. And
Mm.
so it's not, I look at it from an objective measuring instead of just, oh, that person looks like their pelvis is forward. So we see these things. We really truly see these things with our testing. And that's what makes this type of work that I study so unique is that it's not just chiropractic, it's not just PT. We're looking at true root cause. Like what else is going on? I ask people about their childhood trauma,
Mm.
So we gotta dig deep to find that root cause.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many people that are like, it's just the nervous system, it's just this, it's just the diet, it's just the light, it's just, and it's like, we have to stop doing that.
Yeah, we do have to stop doing that because I think like the more I've gotten older, the more I'm seeing that it's accumulation of
So
things.
many things. Yeah.
Some people come in and I hit the nail on the head with the structural component. And
Yes.
then sometimes I refer out to a naturopath and they hit the nail on the head.
Hmm.
Sometimes I refer to a myofunctional therapist or a dentist or an eye doctor, and those are the providers that hit the nail on the head. Now
Hmm.
the UV, the light stuff is really pulling me in because it's like a big component that if I start to address with people, it's going to help, especially
Yeah.
my really sensitive people. You get them in front of a spurty lamp for a month straight, like it can really help them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Agree. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And it's because I think it addresses the redox, it addresses the mitochondria. And when
yeah.
mitochondria are working appropriately, your body has more energy. And if your body doesn't have energy, everything is going to suffer. And so
Yeah.
you're going to see an acceleration of dysfunction. And so for everyone, because I had somebody on my Instagram the other day, and they were like, what supplement protocol did you do to lose weight and get pregnant in your 40s? And I was like, that's irrelevant. Like I wasn't actually, I had to go off of a bunch of supplements.
Yeah.
It wasn't a supplement protocol. And if that's your line of thinking, then you need to take a look at that because you're not going to biochemically change a poor system that needs support from the foundation. The foundation has to be addressed. And that's why I love what you're doing because I think it meshes in really well with this overall foundational approach. And it's yeah, I think we have to do better of it's only the toxic chemicals. And if you just buy air purifier and purify your water, everything will be better. I'm like,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
so interesting because like the more I think about getting back to nature, the more I realize that that's it. Because a few years ago, I was struggling big time with my own regulation, like my nervous system. And yeah, there are things I've done. I did a dental appliance. I did all these things. I moved across the country. Like the move helped me more than anything else, just getting out of New York. And I think that people don't realize that this is an overall lifestyle. If you're
Mhm.
struggling and in pain and you're really, really suffering, you got to look at what you're doing on a daily basis with your life.
Yes.
It is
Yes.
not just one exercise that's going to pull you out of this.
Mm-mm.
It's not just
Mm-mm.
one therapist that's going to pull you out of this. You need to do an overhaul
Yeah.
to your life.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. It's information. Your body is doing the best that it can with the information that you are providing. That
Right.
looks like everything from light to food to the people you're around to this quantum biologic aspect of what's up here, what the programming is, what's it's instructing your body to do. I mean, there's so many layers to it. And it's not just you're going to do this diet and this supplement protocol and everything's going to be better. Like you have to address the whole system. So it's
Yeah, it's so important. And that's where my sessions, my one-on-one sessions with people, it's become more about this.
mm-hmm,
And it's become less about what technique I'm giving that person because it's
mm-hmm.
about that person understanding that this is your life. Like we have to change a lot of things here.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I've been doing one-on-ones the last couple of weeks, and that's the theme that I feel like keeps coming up is like we have to work on the whole lifestyle. It's not just
Yeah,
a protocol I'm going to give you. Like we
right.
really need to look at why is your body putting you in this state of inflammation? Why is your body making you hold on to all this extra weight? What's the mechanism behind that? There's a reason for it. It's because the information you're providing. And so
Yeah.
it's
And it's different for each person. It might be
yes,
unresolved childhood trauma for
yes,
this person, and it might be a really messed up airway position for this person due to
yes.
braces and dental positioning. It might be
Yeah.
a visual system that's off kilter for this other person, and it might be that somebody spends their entire day on screens and never gets outside for another person. So it's person specific, but in the
Mhm.
end of the day, we all need the same stuff.
We do. We do. Yeah. And we can't just defy nature and the way that we were meant to live. Uh, at a certain point, the body just says no.
Right.
We're gonna,
Exactly.
yeah, we're going to present you with enough. We're going to start screaming at you until you listen.
You're
So
gonna stop if that's what the body
hopefully,
says. Like you're gonna have to stop whatever you're doing,
yeah,
hopefully, right? Or else you just get
hopefully.
sicker and sicker. So
Chronic disease epidemic, cancer epidemic, like it's all related. It's not an accident that this is happening right now.
I agree.
Um, so yeah, we got to do better.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
That's why there's providers like us to hear, just spread the good info.
We're trying, we really
Right.
are. Yeah. And I never want people to feel bad like when I say this stuff. there's stuff in my life that I'm just like, I got to change this. This is
Me
not
too.
working well. Like,
100%.
yeah,
Me too.
yeah,
Like that's living and that's growth. That's my opinion on it.
agree, agree, agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so Airway. And
Yeah, let's get
but
into it.
this is such a huge topic. I had Dr. Stephen Lynn on my podcast a few months ago, he's a big airway dentist. And I love the way he looks at stuff. And it put me down the airway rabbit hole in my own life because I shared on a podcast not too long ago that my husband was having some breathing issues, that we were seeing an airway dentist, and um, essentially it was recommended right off the bat that he get a palate expander and that he highly consider jaw surgery and a CPAP. And the more I kind of opened myself to this realm of this is like a thing going on right now, I started realizing like so many people have CPAPs now. Like
Yeah.
it's wild to me. And they're not even doing the airway thing. I have a really close family member who has a CPAP now. I mean, they never even assessed the airway. They just did a sleep study and they're like, whoops, CPAP, bye. You know? So what I just threw a lot at you. Where do you want to start with
I
that?
have thoughts. I have thoughts. So I'll share. So
Okay.
let's start with the CPAP. So here's my thought. If you cannot stand up and breathe effectively, and you cannot lay on your back and breathe effectively, why are we forcing air down your throat?
Mm,
Position that your body is in. Now, there's also this component of like we're literally force feeding you air and your
mm-hmm,
brain doesn't even know what to do with it. Because
mm,
most of the time, the people that are on CPAPs are in a state where their ribs are really, really elevated, lifted up. So they're already in a state of what we call hyperinflation. They
okay.
don't know how to deflate,
Mm,
get all their air out. And when you can get your air out and get your ribs down, then you can take a more effective breath in. But the problem is nobody's looking at how well does this person breathe in the first place.
mm,
Only alternative practitioners like me, or maybe like some people in the breath world, and like some yogis actually work on breathing.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the only place people are getting in meditation. That's the only place people are getting any breath work training.
Yeah.
And I don't always agree with how like it's done in other ways, because they will say like 8-second exhale, 4-second inhale. I agree with that. But I think we need to teach people how to fully exhale so that
Mm,
they can take a better inhale. And so that's my first thing. I think CPAP should be last ditch effort and almost rarely given out. And I think it's given out way too much
all the
without,
time.
it's crazy, actually. It's really crazy because the long-term effects of a CPAP, like, what are we doing to this person? They literally do not know how to breathe, and you're
Right.
force feeding them air. They don't know what to do with that. The brain is
Mm,
just going to keep, essentially, your brain can't utilize that.
mm,
So if you are young and you're snoring, you have to take care of it now.
mm-hmm,
I know people, I've seen patients like 18 years old snoring. This
mm-hmm.
That's horrible. That means you're not getting proper oxygen flow to your
Right.
brain. How are you functioning throughout the day if you're not getting proper sleep, proper oxygen?
Mm-hmm.
People that are sleeping 12 hours a night as an adult, that's not normal. There are
Yeah.
definitely signs of dysfunction when it comes to breathing. But
Mm,
instead of just going with here's this device or take this pill, essentially, it's the same thing.
mm-hmm.
We need to actually go back to the basics and learn how to breathe. And it might take some time, but that's where we're going to see the long-term changes. So every single person that comes in to see me learns how to breathe. In my Rooted Well, it's the first thing I make sure people do, because you have to start with the foundations. We'll get to the actual other airway stuff too. But even with dental work and vision, I always start with, can this
Mm,
person breathe properly laying on their back? Can they breathe standing up? What position is going to be best for this person? And how can we get the rib cage to expand and contract properly? And a big thing that people don't realize when it comes to breathing is when we're working on breathing, I teach people how to fully exhale, hold their breath out, because that's the exchange that's going to get you into the parasympathetic state. That
yes.
pause gets that
Yeah.
parasympathetic state on really in your brain. And then the thing that people don't think about is when you get all your air out, your rib cage comes down. We call it internal rotation. So it comes down and your diaphragm internally comes up, it domes. Now, in order to keep that diaphragm flow where it can do that parachute, we have to keep those ribs a little bit slightly downwards on the inhalation so that those ribs don't just lift up and go into that hyperinflation state again. And this is
Mm,
something that's actually very hard to teach. And I think I have stressed it inside of my Rooted Well platform so that people can really grasp it. Because when you grasp it, it changes how you breathe. And you
mm,
don't have to do that throughout the day. I'm not doing that right now as I'm sitting and talking to you. But
yeah.
when I practice my breathing techniques, I do it. And what it does is it allows for chest expansion to occur and upper back expansion. And chest expansion has been demonized
Hmm.
in yoga. They're like, no,
Oh
chest
yeah.
expand.
Breathe into the
Oh,
belly breathing, diaphragm,
lungs
diaphragm
live
breathing. Yep.
here. I
Yep.
know everything is belly breathing.
Yep.
And the problem, I'll actually grab my rib cage. The problem with only breathing into your belly is it just pushes your center of mass more forward. Because
Uh,
on the ribs, you're going to inhale in. Now you're in something called extension. You're going to exhale out. And then you're going to keep inhaling in like this without ever getting these ribs down, staying down, and then
mm,
getting up here. And we need air into our back area where it's called the posterior mediastinum. And we
mm,
actually have our vagus nerve living back there, which
mm,
is if you're getting air into that region, you're stimulating it, you're getting it to decompress, and you're getting that brain again to sense that parasympathetic. So
mm,
there's multiple ways here that breathing can just get you into a calmer state from a level of anxiety to a level of chronic pain. We have to start here. So
mm,
that belly breathing really is going to push that entire body forward and relying on this state of extension, which is very sympathetic. So that's first when it comes to airway is really airway starts at the rib cage,
mm.
feet and at the pelvis. And so we have dentists that are doing a sleep study. We're not repositioning the rib cage. We're not repositioning the pelvis. The
Right.
person's wearing barefoot shoes all day. They're working inside on a computer all day long, and we're doing a sleep study. Okay, they're not going to have a good score. Like,
Mm-mm.
of course. Then we're going to say, here's a CPAP machine, or let's get you a dental appliance to pull your bottom jaw forward, which is what
Mm.
we do all the time. Now
Yep.
you have a body that's coming forward in space, and we have a dental appliance jutting that bottom jaw forward. So now you have an entire cranium that's forward. When
Mm.
what we need is we need to get the body back.
Yeah.
And so dentists are looking at a piece of the puzzle without understanding the entire rest of the system.
Mm.
And optometrists do the same thing, and it's not their fault. It's how they were trained. So it's no, I have no negative feeling towards dentists or optometrists. I love them. I work closely with them. The negative feelings I have is that the school, the education is limited, and
Yeah.
we're not looking at things holistically from lots of layers of education, not just dental and optometry. Also, what I studied in school too.
Yeah.
But what we can do for this person is have them starting with foundational techniques that allow for their body to move back in space, get them
Mm.
to breathe, and get them into a better state. Then do your sleep study, because that sleep study is probably going to be very different before and after working with a practitioner or doing something online that gives you the tools you need to get your body into a better position.
Yeah.
And then yeah, the palatal expansion stuff, it's a different conversation for kids versus adults.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Definitely.
it's a
Yeah,
really
because most of us, like me, we and my husband both, like we had all of like our back teeth extracted, our wisdom teeth extracted,
yeah.
and our jaws are smaller than they should be. And
Yeah.
that kind of puts you behind the eight ball to begin with, right?
And now it's really less orthodontists are taking out permanent teeth.
Yeah.
There are the wisdom teeth is still a very big thing that
Yeah.
is being taken out, and I always tell patients try to avoid that. I had my wisdom teeth taken out too,
Yeah.
but I'd say a lot of like 40, 50, 60, 70-year olds have had their premolars taken out, and
Yeah.
that's detrimental
Hmm.
for cranial positioning. And I actually treat it as if it's a full-blown head injury. But
Wow.
yeah, because the brain has to completely recalibrate when those teeth are taken out.
Wow.
And a lot of people that take really good care of themselves, like I'm thinking about two specific people right now that have had their premolars taken out that are my close friends. They take really good care of themselves. They're pretty fine. Like they're able to manage. But most people don't take such great care of themselves.
Right. Right.
That's the thing. It's like if you then you got a pair of glasses. Now your glasses prescription kept going up, and then
Yes.
you spend all day inside because
Yes.
you make video games. Like that person's going to struggle.
Right.
that person might have sciatic pain that never goes away. Like
Yes.
there's things that, and that sciatic pain could literally be attributed to those teeth being taken out when they were 4 years
Wow.
old. And
Wow.
people put two and two together because we're not taught to.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, taking those teeth out is detrimental. There are some amazing orthodontists in New York City. One specifically, his name is Dr. Nuaz, and I'm dropping his name because he did a paper when he was younger because he personally had his premolars taken out. So when
Mm-hmm.
he was in dental school, he did a paper studying orthodontists who've had their own premolars taken out to see if they take other people's teeth out. And he found that orthos that have had their own teeth taken out, premolars specifically, don't typically take out their patients' premolars. They find a way around it. And it's very interesting.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I've worked with him on some cases, but some of the patients that I've seen his work, he'll expand them and he'll actually put implants in if they've gotten their premolars taken out. So those usually like 18-year-olds that
Mm-hmm.
saw he did that with, not everybody, but what you want with an adult is you want to do all this foundational work prior to doing anything, jaw surgery, um, anything related to palatal expansion. Like I'm talking at least a year. Dedicate
Mm-hmm.
yourself at least a year to doing techniques and potentially working with a dentist to get you an appliance to sleep in at night. It's not an appliance that pulls you in any which direction. It's a flat plane splint. And I have more information on the platform Rooted Well Advanced that I'm releasing at the end of next week. And there's a bunch of dental information in there that talks about these splints and what you could take to your dentist to show your dentist, like, this is, can you make me this essentially? And
Mm-hmm.
we are very specific with how they're made because we do test them in the clinic. We do go with our patient to the appointment, but that's not feasible for everybody. So
Right.
you just have to start somewhere with foundational work to get you in a better spot so that maybe you can avoid things like jaw surgery. You can avoid things like palatal expansion because some people do really need palatal expansion as an adult. They
Mm-hmm.
really do, but you still need to do the work prior because if you're very asymmetrical prior, you're going to be expanded and become more asymmetrical.
Or
Right.
right.
So it's a complicated, very bio-individual thing that you can navigate yourself through if there's no provider near you. You just need the right information and guidance.
Now, do you do consults with people who maybe have already seen an airway dentist, have like a cone beam scan and x-rays and all that stuff?
Yeah, I've seen people who have maybe one or two different opinions, and then I can kind of help them guide where to go. I usually will tell people if they have all that, I'll tell people, look, let's work on this for a while. Let's at least do like 5 to 7 sessions before you jump into anything dentally. I've worked with people that are in the process of like a Vivos dental appliance, which we can
Mhm.
talk about, which is
Yes.
post DNA. Honestly, I'm very honest about this. I am not a fan of that appliance.
What is it called? A Vivo, you said?
Evos DNA appliance, I have
Okay.
never ever seen it go well,
Really?
honestly. I have seen a bunch of cases and I've never seen one be done positively.
Wow.
I've seen other issues pop up while they're in that appliance. Whereas like some other appliance, like the regular expansion devices, sometimes people feel amazing.
Mm,
Great. So I haven't seen that. I mean, the people that are also coming to see me are hurting.
mm-hmm.
I have a skewed perception because I'm only seeing people that are
Very
hurting.
pain, yeah.
But
There was
that's a
one you
really
posted
big
in your
one.
story, I think it was last night or a couple nights ago. And I was trying to show my husband and he was like, I don't want to look at anything.
I don't remember which. Oh, I reposted somebody.
Yeah, you reposted somebody and the guy, he had just worn an appliance and his whole jaw had expanded without doing
Homeo block, which
what
is
is it?
better.
Homeo
Homeo,
block?
yeah.
Okay.
Like, yeah, so these appliances, I'm just like also learning, because I'm not a dentist by training. So I have to
Right.
learn as much as a general person. So I'm in the same boat, but a homeo block is quite different and they do have better results for sure than Vivos. And there's also the Alpha appliance. There's a lot of different appliances on the market because
That
people
one.
do patent them and make money off them, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And each appliance is different. And so you need to know what ortho you're going to before you do anything. Like if
Mhm.
your ortho only does one appliance, I recommend seeing another ortho that has a little more experience in other appliances.
Yeah.
Um, but I do have a decent network here of orthodontists that I've worked with that I like that do adult and child palatal expansion. But Yeah, adults are really struggling and they think that this is going to be their, fix. And for some people, it truly is.
Mm,
I don't really hear of cases besides Vivos where the expansion is not helpful for the
helpful.
person. But I think that if you do the work beforehand, you're way more likely to have a better outcome. Like your outcome is most likely going to be better because it's going to be working with your body at the same
Hmm.
time. If
Yeah.
working, seeing a postural restoration provider, or doing some online work for the rest of your body in congruence with whatever you're doing dentally, that's key. But yeah, palatal expansion is one of my last things to do with somebody. And
Yeah.
tongue tie release is even further last.
Mm.
I just don't think it's always necessary. So the dental stuff, it's like there's so much out there. It's jumbled for so many people and they just don't know how to navigate it.
Great. It's overwhelming, honestly. I
Extremely
mean,
overwhelming.
with my husband, it's like we got into this because he got some blood work and we got some tests done. And I'm like, oh, his heart health is not really that great.
Right.
And it doesn't make any sense because he is very healthy, like very lean. He can, we went to see a cardiologist and they were like, this makes zero sense. Like zero, we saw several and they were like, my average client is like, or patient is smoking, obese, eating McDonald's, eating crap, and you're like so super healthy. And so then that's when I was like, okay, let's look in the airway
Yeah.
dentist because you have been snoring the whole time we've been married. So this is like something I've been diving into. And the more I get into it, the more I'm like, wait a minute,
So layered.
there's so many aspects to this. And that's what got me to reach out to you finally, because I've been following your work and I listened to you with Mercola when you were on his. And I'm like, this is so freaking fascinating. But there's, for me, there's always like a little personal element of like, okay, I have a family member, I have a friend who's struggling with this. And with my husband, as I mentioned, his posture from having back surgeries
Yeah.
is something where I'm like, we need to look at this first before we start doing expansion and surgery and all this other stuff. Like it doesn't make sense to me as somebody who likes to look at the body from like, but
Yeah.
why did it do that? What, like, that's what I always ask. I'm sure you do too. It's like, okay, but why did your body do that? Why is your body shutting down your airway? Like, if
Yeah.
is forcing oxygen into your mouth at night when you're sleeping the solution?
Right.
Not
Exactly.
long
Exactly.
term. Yeah.
Right. Like, what do you do when you're in your 70s? Like, is that CPAP still going to work if it, you know? And
Right.
yeah, it's a very jumbled field. And I do have like two dentists I work with out in California that I'm friends with that I really would love for there to be like a course on every single expansion device with pros
Yeah.
and cons. And somebody like you who's like interested could take it, even for
Yeah.
kids. And
Hmm.
I would love to be part of something like that to talk about what it could do to the body.
Hmm.
But again, it's also like it's hard to know because
Yeah.
it's person specific. But
It is.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a jumbled field. But I know for sure that every single person, like with your husband's story, like every person needs to start with foundations because
Hmm.
he might be able to make some significant changes
Yep.
with our techniques before anything gets put in his mouth, before anything
Right.
gets on his eyes. He might make some really significant changes.
Yep.
A shoe could change how he feels.
That's what I'm thinking. And he'll do it. Like he's the kind of
Yeah.
person he's like went to Georgia Tech. Like he's very much like, I'll do it. Just tell me what to do. I'll do
Yeah.
it. And he was an athlete, all that stuff. I'm the one who's like, I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
not
but when you're struggling, people will do it. People will do
he'll,
what they do.
he'll do it. Like he'll do anything. So we'll definitely be exploring some stuff. And then one other thing I wanted to ask about, because I know I heard you talk about this on Mercola, was the mouth tape. Because
Mm,
one thing that I started making him wear mouth tape when we found out that there's a heart issue, and I'm like, you're not breathing. And he has stopped wearing it in the last couple of weeks. And he's like, I feel better without the stupid mouth tape. I'm waking up in the morning, not feeling like crap, not feeling exhausted. And when I was wearing the mouth tape, I felt worse. And I'm like,
interesting. Don't
oh,
usually hear that. That's a
no,
very weird response. He could really just have such a limited airway that he cannot get air
I
in. And
think that's
so
what
when
it
you're taping
is.
his mouth, it's making it harder for him to breathe
Yeah.
instead of doing what we would want, which is opening him up and forcing him to essentially breathe through his nose. He
Yeah.
just physically can.
Yeah.
So that's where getting his cranium into a better position before even that would be helpful. And then I know I work with some myofunctional therapists, and they don't always recommend mouth tape immediately because they think that tongue position is very important when it comes to mouth tape, and maybe his tongue is blocking his airway. There could be a lot of things that,
Probably, yeah. And
yeah,
every time I post about mouth tape on Instagram, because I will every now and then, I'll say, like, because I love it, I swear by it.
I like it too.
I mean, for me, it's been something I've worn for years, and I freaking love it. Um, but anytime I post about it, I will get at least, and I was telling my husband this last night to kind of validate him a little bit. I will get at least one comment out of 180 some odd thousand people. Air tape, the mouth tape almost killed me. Like, mouth tape was completely shutting down my airway to the point where I almost had a heart attack. And I'm like,
So
okay,
those are the people that really, really, truly need what I offer, because they need to get their body into a better position before they even tape,
yeah.
which is wild to think about because most people do fine, but there are always negative
There's always
side effects.
become like, put yourself out there on social media,
I
podcast, start getting comments from like thousands of people
know.
all over the world, and you're like, oh. And if you have a brain and any bit of empathy in your body, you're going to start to see like people struggle with all kinds of stuff that you never could imagine was even a thing.
I know.
It's like, okay, I got to look into this now.
Well, now it's like we have become the society that names everything and diagnoses everything too. So now there's all these new terms for things, and I'm just like, it's still nervous system dysregulation.
Right. Your
Care what you
mitochondria
tell me.
still needs support.
Yes, it's still your system isn't working effectively or
Right.
efficiently,
Right.
and you're struggling.
Right.
I don't care if you tell me you have dysautonomia or you need jaw surgery or whatever. It's all part of the problem. And now we just name everything in today's society.
Yes. Yeah. I have.
Over medicalize everything. It's wild.
Yeah. And I talk about this with my other podcast partner, Carrie, all the time, is that when you start to take on these diagnoses, when you start to create a personality and an identity around
Yeah,
them, it programs your body into even more dysfunction, and it
so
prevents
true.
you from leaping into that stage of healing that, there's a whole, that water in your body is being structured in a specific way. The resonance in your body
Yeah.
is different when you identify yourself with a diagnosis. And so I think is interesting because maybe that could lead them to a path of different providers or techniques, but it's also can be very toxic to constantly have to diagnose. And yeah, I get in my feelings about it when people are like, oh, I'm autistic. I'm like, come spend the day in my house. You don't have what my daughter has. Like, you shouldn't be calling it that. Like, I don't
Yeah.
feel like that's appropriate. You know,
Yeah.
I understand neurodivergence and all that whole conversation, but I get like, don't, you're not, it's not the same as what she's dealing with.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because now people also associate themselves so much that they make Instagram pages off
Yes.
this. And
Yes.
there's a couple like podcasts and stuff that have wanted me on that, like, I noticed that there's like this association to like mold or whatever. And I'm always thinking like,
Oh yeah.
you
The
didn't
mold,
label yourself
parasites.
with like this is your thing, then you can't ever get away from it. Like, I was an Olympic weightlifter, okay? And
Mhm.
I labeled myself as an Olympic weightlifter for 4 or 5 years. And that
Mhm.
was who I was. And then when I was told I need to stop weightlifting, the week I was told I stopped, I just quit cold turkey. My system was really fried.
Yeah.
I went through this major identity crisis.
Sure. Crisis. Yep.
So,
Yep.
like, what happens when you heal from mold? What happens when you heal from Lyme?
Right.
Now what? Are you still the Lyme guru?
Yeah. Are you
So it's
still the
different.
parasite queen? Like,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
different to be a doctor that treats that and have that in your bio versus making your
Yes.
page about that. And it's the same with this stuff. Like, I see people like jaw surgery queen, and it's like, oh yeah, yeah, it makes me cringe. I'm like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be like that. But also, that is part of what we talked about before, where it's like personality enmeshed, childhood trauma enmeshed with the healing.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't separate yourself from like not wanting to be sick anymore, and you want to stay
Yes.
sick, then you're not going to get better. And there's nothing that I can do to help you get better.
Mm-mm.
That
Mm-mm.
has taken me a long time as a practitioner to realize, a long,
Hard.
because I can't want my patient to get better more than they want it themselves.
Correct. Yeah, and it's hard. And I come from a place of like absolute love and compassion and always wanting to try to put out information like this podcast. I've been recording it every week since 2020. Like, I've never missed a week. And I do this because I really love showing up for people and putting out information that leads them to different ways that they can heal and get better. But there's only so much that you can do when somebody comes to you of like, I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this. Like, I'm like, okay, but I need
Cool.
to know, how do you live? What's going on in your life? When you do a one-to-one with somebody and you really have a full conversation, you're like, well, this is it becomes more clear to you on the other end of like, well, this is why this is happening,
Exactly.
this is what's going on. I'll have people on consultations. I'm like, let's go through your day on a 24-hour basis. And they'll tell me things and I'll hear other things. I'm like, oh, so let's talk more about this. You know?
Well, it's true. And like that, it's so hard to see yourself
Yeah.
accurately. And that's why people come to us as providers. Like they just
Yeah.
want to, essentially, I'm just giving people
A
an accurate
mirror.
view of themselves, a mirror. And
Hmm.
I might provoke different things to come out. And I'm doing it in a very compassionate way. Like I really truly love and care for all my patients, but I want them to see these things so that they can heal.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to see them. If you're sitting inside wallowing in your own victimhood, I can't change that, but I can tell you what I see from my perspective.
Yeah.
And sure, I could do my testing and we could go through all that. But if your whole day is consumed by politics or the media, that you're not going to, you have to detach from that to get
Hmm.
to free yourself.
Hmm.
I think that people, this is the human struggle of modern society. I don't think
Yeah.
this was the human struggle of 200 years ago, but I think it is today's human struggle.
It's different. It's different problems. I mean, we were worried
Yeah,
about different things 200 years ago than we are now. It's a different set of problems, but um,
yeah,
yeah,
100%.
it's
It's
tough.
crazy. We thought we'd talk more about Airway and all that stuff, but it goes into this, these are the conversations I like. This is a deep connection, deep conversation that we're having on here. And I hope people listening can hear it because
Mhm.
this is really the truth of it.
Yeah,
You
it
know?
really is. It truly is.
Sure, it's about the rib cage and pelvis, but it's also really about what's actually going on.
Yeah. Again, why is your body doing that? What
Right.
information are you giving it that's putting it into that state, And again, with absolute love and compassion for the person that's in that place. Um, that we're all human and we're all doing the best that we can with the environment and what we have. But sometimes our body is giving us a clear message that
Yeah.
we got to make some changes. We have to shift. And it's not always an easy conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Well, I did want to ask about vision really quickly, and then
Yeah,
maybe
let's
we
do
can
it.
talk about some of your offers and ways because I know my people are definitely going to want to know how to follow you and programs and things that you're doing.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the vision component super quick if we can
Yeah,
come
sure.
to
It's
play.
it's the same idea as dentistry, really. I mean, I will say vision is, I think, more complicated. Of course, dentistry is complicated too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but vision, it can be more specific. We can have eye turns. We can have all these different things. We have all these different types of prescriptions that might work for somebody. But I work with developmental or behavioral optometrists. That's their
Hmm.
title. You can look on the website. It's called OVDRA and FCOVD, I think is the other. Well, that was their title. Or NORA, NORA. There's different certifications that they have. Um,
Hmm.
they have more schooling than regular optometrists to
Okay.
understand how well the eyes work together and what information the brain gets and that influences our body. Ophthalmologists typically are mainly concerned with eye health. So
Yeah.
whenever I have a patient and they're like, "Oh, I got this prescription," they show it to me and it's from an ophthalmologist, I'm like, "This is not ideal," because
Mhm.
ophthalmologists are great at eye health, but I don't use them for refraction. So when you sit in front of the machine and they get your prescription and they tell you this is what you should wear in your glasses, I work with optometrists for that. That's their specialty.
Okay.
And all the people I work with do things like vision rehab. Our eyes influence where we go in space. So
Hmm.
if we are not seeing something not clearly, but if our brain doesn't register it, in the proper kind of way, then our body's not going to feel safe going there. So, for example, if we have a little bit less left peripheral vision, then our body is not going to be comfortable going over to our left leg as much.
Hmm. Yeah.
And most of us do have a little less left peripheral. Some people have more than they should. And so what we sometimes use the visual system because somebody has a visual problem that we need to tweak to get their body into a better position so that the techniques we use can work even better for them. And
Mm.
sometimes we use the visual system as an in to allow for better movement. So that means that the person might not actually have a vision problem, but I will send them to my optometrist because I think they could benefit from something on their eyes, whether it blurs them or it makes them clearer is not really the point. It's not about acuity. But like,
Mm.
for example, like I've worked with athletes that have perfect 15/20 vision, and actually having that perfect vision has messed with their body a little bit. So actually blurring them ever so slightly can give
Hmm.
them better movement. Just because you have perfect sight does not mean that you have perfect vision. And vision is more how your brain interprets the data you're getting from both eyes and how well your eyes work together. So
Huh.
that's yeah, and we do see I do see a lot of like braces at 14, 15 years old and kids getting glasses right afterwards. So there's yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, and of course, this is like is some research on the visual system and even how you get that eye exam done. Like, are they watching you walk with the prescription on? There's different things that can be done in that eye exam to make sure we're getting that person a very adequate prescription versus just sitting in the chair, leaning your head forward, and is this better one or two? So the optometrists I work with are really good at taking a lot of testing and making sure that we're getting a prescription that encompasses a lot of different positions and moving through space because you use your eyes when you move through space, not
All the time.
I
Yeah.
use my eyes here on this screen, sure, but in order for me to move and play tennis tomorrow, I need my eyes to be able to move well through space and tell my body proprioception where to go. And if I'm
Mm.
only corrected in a sitting position, that might not work for when I play tennis.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. This is so
Yeah.
intuitive, but it's
It
so
is, right?
common sense. But yeah, once again, we're kind of in the dark ages
I
with
know.
another thing with the human body. Like think we're doing something really helpful, but we may not be when you actually try to do this in a functional way.
Yeah, it's really interesting because also there's not many optometrists that grasp this information. There's not many dentists that can grasp this information. It's very
Mm.
hard. And then
Mm.
there's like, yeah, there's just it's tough because I'm this middle person and I'm trying to communicate with all of them on one patient.
Mm.
It's a lot, but it's fun and it can be very frustrating, but it can be very rewarding. But
Yep.
the visual system, it's a very big part of my job. And if PTs and chiropractors out there that are trying so hard with their patients to get them better and they're not, could be some higher level issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you had a reel, I think it was last night,
About
about
LASIK.
yes, which I'm sure you got all kinds of
Oh, that reel did so well. And sometimes the stuff on LASIK does really well. I actually am going to do another one on LASIK.
nice.
'Cause I think that it's so important. But yeah, LASIK can be detrimental.
Mm.
Detrimental. I My best friend had LASIK and she's fine, thank
Yeah.
God.
You
But
said that in your reel too. You said that
fine.
like some people get it and they're just completely fine, but some people get it and they get really, really messed up. And
Yeah.
why is that though?
So there's multiple reasons. They actually cut the corneal nerve, which is like helps to produce tears. So now every single person that leaves LASIK has an automatic dry eye. Whether they feel fine and they don't feel it or not, they have dry eyes. If you look at somebody who
Um,
has LASIK, they'll have a dry eye feature of their eye. Okay, so
mm,
that's number one. Number two, a lot of people really do suffer with significant dry eyes post LASIK, big time.
mm,
And dry eyes is something that can be very debilitating.
mhm,
This is from the structure. Then on
mhm,
top of it, you have, let's say somebody is walking around today wearing the incorrect prescription. It's too much for them.
mhm,
And now we're deciding to glue it onto their eyes. But that prescription in the first place was too much for them. Even though it's been the same for 4 years, which is the criteria for LASIK, just because that prescription has been the same, when they go through my protocol here, we
it
might
may
have to get
change.
that down by a diopter on each eye. My
Mhm.
eyes were used to be almost two, and now I don't wear anything right now.
And
But
you work with Taylor, right?
yeah, you know Taylor?
She was on the show like, when I was pregnant, so it's been a minute, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I worked
Yeah.
with her. Yeah, she's how I knew Marcola too. And yeah, so yeah, because she did the podcast with him too. But Taylor used to live 15, 20 minutes from me here, and we used to hang out all the time. But
Oh.
she moved to Florida.
Oh,
So
nice.
I'm
Good
gonna
for
go
her.
but she's brilliant, optimizing,
She
right?
is.
That's her name. And talking about holistic eye care. She's
Yes.
awesome. And we did LASIK posts together that I shared a couple days ago. And yeah, she really turned me on to seeing things from another holistic optometry perspective, from the actual eye, like the structure of the eye. But correct, we can get these eye prescriptions to go down. But now we have an eye prescription that's glued onto somebody's eye. And that can create problems from a structural body perspective, to the
Mm.
point where we might need a pair of glasses to actually give them plus, to allow for their brain to take in the proper information, because we'll see bodies that cannot get what we call neutral because of LASIK. So we see it from actual eyeball issues, from the structure there, and then from the structure of the rest of the body where there's problems. So I've had patients with chronic hip pain for literally 3 months after they got LASIK, till we saw an optometrist and got things figured out. So it can
Wow.
present as many things, sciatica. It could be all random things. I don't always know what it's going to be, but I do see it quite commonly. And
Wow.
doctors that do LASIK, first of all, most of them wear glasses. And a lot of times they don't realize that it could be this detrimental.
Yeah. And
And
then there's the
yeah.
circadian implications. I know I
Oh,
had an eye doctor who's kind of more on the quantum piece. She's been through the QBC, and she brings a lot of this stuff into her practice with optometry. And we talked about what that does with the blockage of the UV light and the issues with that from a circadian standpoint. I think that's another overlooked thing. So
who's that? What's her name?
her name is Dr. Valerie. I cannot pronounce her last name. I'll send her over to you. She's
Yes. I'd love to.
Quantum Eye Doc is who
Awesome.
her handle is on Instagram. She's been putting out a lot of great information. She's really fun
That's
too.
really cool.
Yes. So I would definitely hook you up with her.
Please
Um,
do.
but yeah, I don't want anyone that's had LASIK to you
Feel hopeless.
you can't undo it. It's like you can't undo cataracts, you can't undo LASIK. I even had to have a whole section in my leptin reset now to explain we have photoreceptors on the skin. We have other mechanisms, we have other ways that our
Yeah.
body can learn and adapt. So don't beat yourself up if you did something you were doing the best you could at the time. But if you're someone who's about to make a decision on this, know that there are other options for you
Yeah.
to explore that you may do what you want to do, but here's some other options you may want to look into before you make such a permanent decision.
Yeah, I filmed the 20-minute video yesterday that got deleted, so I have to redo it. But it was about what to do if you've had LASIK. And I
Oh,
want this 20-minute video, people inside of the Rooted Well Advanced will be able to see it. But I
that.
really want to get it out to those people that have struggled with LASIK, because it's
Mhm.
vital. I'm
Yeah.
thinking about doing like a paid, eventually, like a one-off for people who've had LASIK, because I got so many people talking to me about it, and I don't even realize how many people are struggling. And I know that those people, once they've already had it, they do feel hopeless, and I don't want people to feel hopeless, because there are things you can do. There's
Right.
definitely techniques you can do, and there's things that can help you feel better. You don't have to struggle forever because you had LASIK.
Right. Right. Yeah. I love that. Well, I would definitely encourage anyone listening or watching to go and follow you. I will make sure I put all your links and website and Instagram handle in the show notes, because you just put out such really, really good information. But you've mentioned let's talk about that a little bit in case anyone's driving. Like, how can they find you? What kind of programs? What kind of consultations? Things like that do you offer currently?
Sure. So the best way to find me is on Instagram. That's where I post more, and I'm on there. And that's just my full name, Aleena Kanner. And then I do work with people mainly in person. I am located in New York City, but I also do travel. Like I mentioned to you, I'll be in Florida here soon, seeing patients. So I do travel around. So you can always get on my lists for when I'm in different places, and potentially see me in person for a session. But what I do recommend for most people is to check out Rooted Well, which I've mentioned a few times here, because that's essentially where all my information is kept. It's in a platform so that you can access it and check it out. And I have two. One is foundations and one is advanced, for exactly what you might think. Foundations is mainly ribcage pelvis breathing. And you really should check that out before you do advanced. And advanced is more dental, vision, LASIK, all the stuff we were just talking about. And even for the people that I do see that fly in to see me, or for people who are seeing me in another state, I actually still recommend them to do phase
Mm,
1 of Rooted Well, because then they have a little bit more under their belt. They've tried some things. They understand a little bit more of when they come and see me.
amazing.
So I've really poured my heart and soul into that to try and get it out there for people. And yeah, that's pretty much those are your options.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I might be sending my husband down to Florida.
Yeah, I'm excited to meet him.
I'll get
It'll be
him the
great.
rooted well, get him on the program. I know I
It'll
have to do something about my jaw at some point as well, because my teeth are doing this thing where they keep getting more crowded. I'm like, yeah, I know, I know. We're dealing with some stress. We're stressed
Well,
out.
that is a thing. That is a thing.
I
But
know it is. I know it is. I'm like, I'll get to me. Let's do my husband first.
yeah,
I'll
that's
be
true
next.
love. True love.
It is. You get to be fixed first, and then my turn. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm super excited to connect with you, and
Yeah.
we'll definitely have to do some more collaborating in some way in the future. And I'm so excited for everyone to listen to this episode and kind of get their minds blown. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on. I love what you're doing. I told you in
Oh,
the beginning. I think you're like a brilliant force. So I'm so excited to be on here and share my information, but like you're awesome, and I'm excited to meet you eventually in person too.
yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Aleena. This has been great. Thank you so much for listening to the Evolving Wellness Podcast. Just a quick little reminder, this is not medical advice nor meant to be taken as a substitute for working one-on-one with a healthcare practitioner. And if you enjoy the show, please head on over to Apple or Spotify to leave the show up to a 5-star review. If you're over on YouTube, please leave us a like, leave us a comment. I really appreciate you for being here, for listening to the show, and your support means the world to me as I continue to try to pull guests from around the world to bring you informative content to empower you to make decisions about your own health. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.